Hello, everybody. It is Boothby and David Tensen, and this is our conversations for restoration. So, of course, I had to ask David to come along and have a chat.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for putting up with the time change. We always have to get creative, and you're so generous with having super early mornings on these calls.
Hey, this is it's like 21 degrees outside and 6:30 a.m. here, so it's hard to sleep in with this kind of heat.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. That's gorgeous. So, David, you maybe let's just start off talking about some of the cool things you have going on because I think they're very fitting into these conversations.
Hmm.
So you can you tell us about the new school, the new series of workshops that you're launching?
Yeah, of course. Thanks. Let's do the promo at the start.
Why not? I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to inspire the conversation because it's very, very cool.
Yeah, thanks. So the Collective Wisdom Academy, if you go to collectivewisdomacademy.com, that's the website. A friend of mine, Gary Grant, who was a pastor for many years and has worked in business and other things, and his wife Debbie, who is works in equine therapy and counseling and works in the people help space a lot as well. They sort of wrapped up their faith community after 20 years. One of the things they began to do towards the end is run a weekly kind of rabbinical style academy. By that, I mean, it's not a sage on the stage speak at you for 40 minutes. It was interactive tables, questions, arguing. It was really interactive, and they had run that for a few years, and they said we are seeing so much more fruit from our Sunday night academies rather than the Sunday service. And each of those things is a service to the community, but it, by way of having people grow and deepen in their faith and their relationship with God and others, self life, the academy was so fruitful. So when the community sort of evolved, they said, we want to do this academy, but we want to move it online. And it was about a year of us sort of talking, and we just felt 2025 was the right time to do that. So we just run 3 Zooms per month. Um, and we want to pick topics that you're not going to hear commonly on a Sunday. You might hear on a podcast occasionally, but this allows you to interact and be part of it. And so the methodology or the way that we're delivering it or the learning space that we're working to create is as much powerful as the message itself,
Mm.
because it allows us to draw on the collective wisdom of everybody that's attending. So Gary's going to do some stuff on imagination in March. I think you're up in April. You're going to talk about love sciences for 3 weeks. So it's 2 hours a week for 3 weeks. That's it. And then Debbie Grant is going to talk on finding peace in nature and animals. She has a profound sort of revelation and works with animals a lot in that space. I'm going to do one on poetry. We're talking to Paul Young, who's probably going to do one as well. So there's a few people. We just want to get subject matter experts in. But when you come along, it's not, I don't believe in just, turning up and shutting up and going away, because you might as well listen to a podcast. Like, honestly, everybody's busy enough. The world's changed. This is how we get information. But this is about people bringing their experience. All the participants are part of the learning environment. So
Yeah.
that's going to be exciting. I've seen this work, particularly in this online environment at the university that I work at part time as well, where we bring small businesses together. And part of my PhD research is on adult learning education for small business practitioners. And so I've seen that collaborative learning environment bring so much to a discussion, because people are turning up with adults. You might have been a Christian for 30, 40 years. Why would I ask you to not say anything? Do you know, like,
Exactly.
why would I ask you not like to just to keep your mouth shut? People
Yeah.
complain that, the Bible says that women should keep their mouth shut in church. Well, most men have to keep their mouth shut too. Like, unless you've got the mic on a Sunday, you don't do that. So we're just, it's not a church. We're not calling it a faith community as such. but we'll have sort of, or even a Christian thing, but we will have Christ-centered discussions in that. But we're also picking topics that are kind of, again, like I said, you probably won't hear
Yeah.
on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, the interface and like the glass bead game is so much more of what we're realizing, that like it can't just be theology alone. I feel like it's risky to say that, but the interface between psychology, philosophy, theology, and science, and it's really fun to play around with how science actually proves the truths of theology and to have those discussions. I also like what you're saying. It reminds me of the first conversation for restoration I did with Eden Jerzak and her talking about her church. We're seeing this movement in the new church structure, this love-based, Trinitarian-based structure, where the leadership is creating order around having these beautiful discussions. No, it's not didactic, it's interactive, it's experiential.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is a, and we can talk about this later, but, good, meaningful, love-based conversations are a skill to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and we can learn those environments. There are church programs like the Alpha program. If you've ever been part of that, and that's the start of a lot of people's faith journey, it's based around roundtables, some guided discussions, some meals, some good questions. We do live in a knowledge soaked world. And I like the idea of living with and being intentional with having and asking beautiful questions
Mm-hmm.
as guideposts for moving forward. What are some beautiful questions that we can ask and continue to ask one
Yeah.
another and ourselves, and then
And
shut up and listen?
yeah, and asking questions, listening, and uh the deconstructing of how I was raised. I believed I had to have answers.
Mm.
And in this new space, leaning into the mystery, the mystical
Mm.
experience of who and how God is, the God that we know. It's
Yeah,
not about answers, it's so much more relational.
yeah,
Mhm.
100%. So we're excited about seeing how that unfolds.
Yeah.
Yeah, so starts in March. People can jump online. It's the cost it's $33 Australian. That's the minimum sort of donation for the whole 3 weeks. So it's very cost effective. We wanted to keep it affordable. We have some costs to cover ourselves, and it should be
But
exciting to see what
what
happens.
would 33 Australian dollars equal in US dollars? Most people are familiar.
Like $20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So
it's
this is fun.
just
This is really fun.
yeah, yeah. We didn't want to exclude people who really want to come, but we've all learned that if you make things free, uh, look, if people can't afford it at all, they can write to us. That's not a problem. But yeah, we just to keep it affordable and keep the barriers to entry down.
Yeah.
Um, I've been there. I've been at those places where I'm grateful.
Yeah.
The registration is affordable. Given that it's 3 weeks, and if they can't make it, they can get the recordings. Yeah,
Yes.
because some of the time zones will be difficult to make
Yeah.
across nations, because Gary and Debbie have a really big influence in India too. So there'll be we'll have cohort from around the world already. Some registrations and pre-registrations and interests are coming from
Yeah. I'll be
different
registering
parts
for
of the
all of
world.
them. And I might have to be watching some online, but I desperately want to hear Gary's, and now after talking to you about Debbie's, I'm very interested. And then of course, I mean, like, I identify as a poet, so any chance
Mm.
I have to learn from you, very, very excited. So, and we'll have all that information in the description below. And then David, of course, is on Instagram.
Yeah.
Um, also just keeping with this idea of the trend moving towards these like open table, we're meeting people at the table and we're having these conversations.
Mm.
I've been reading Evelyn Underhill, who's more of a modern mystic, and it's interesting because I hear in the new space, it fits with Love and Love's energy too, that we're starting to understand a shift from what religion is, that within religion, there's the nature of religion. There's the structure, there's the organization, there's the clear need for the body, the community. And then there's also this nurture piece, these environments that you're talking about where we come together and think and ask questions. There's this new move to like having very nurtured relationships, a little bit different than just a Bible study or something.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, because the goal isn't about finding all the right answers, I guess, in these spaces. And you tell me what you would say, but I sense the goal in these spaces is more about being with each other, um, being in love with ourselves and the person beside us and God.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't know what it's like in Canada, and I know this varies in different cultures, right? If you're a collective or individualistic culture, but we're from individualistic cultures, Western cultures usually are. We don't have. I think a lot of churches that I know over the years have struggled to put together home groups. We could call them home groups or Bible study groups, which is a midweek catch up around either some of them have topic of interest, like if you're into decoupage or something, catch up. We do this on Wednesday nights, or we play pickleball on Wednesday nights, and it's a bunch of people from church, or it's a hard end sort of Bible study, or it's notes from the sermons, whatever it is. I have been part of communities over the years and seen that really work really well, particularly if there's some strong home group leaders there and the church has a program and system to support them. So I think a lot of Christians might be able to look back or be part of, at the moment, part of really good, small, handful of families that come together and support and love one another. And I think that is such a beautiful and wonderful sort of gospel expression.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've tasted that and seen that, I think a lot of us long for that and want for that. At the same time, Tara, if I look at my life right now, what's required of us just to pay bills every week, and then have 3 young adult children. Life's busy. Like I'm driving somebody to work, somebody to a music practice, or somebody to sports as well. And so things that Natalie and I used to be able to attend together and bring the kids is not really an option either. So I think depending on the stage of life you're at too, there are some, I'll just call them logistical challenges that would make some things possible. Like if people want to have a meal with us, sometimes, it's a 2-3 week, we need to plan way ahead, not because we're busy having dinners with people. It's just that we have to juggle all these extra things. So I think it's particularly in the early stages of, say, parenthood or adulthood, and then pass beyond sort of the active parenting stage. I think these groups and communities where relationship is at the bedrock of what matters and what can make a difference in your life can be really profound and beautiful.
I agree. And I think it's refreshing to think about, like, even the sense of the spiritual discipline of coming together just to play,
Yes.
like those, if people are wondering, what do I do? How can I connect? There is still something about just coming together to play. We don't have to always be focused on something really religious and divine happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've lost connection with that playfulness a lot, as the culture has gotten more and more individualistic.
Yeah.
Or like potluck. Like the church used to have so much more potluck. There'd be like the school or the church would have a gymnasium, like these things that would cause people to come together, and it was not about being churchy.
Mm. where we attend from time to time, and the church my son's involved in is a very unique setup. It's the guy who, there's a couple of these on the coast, a couple of locations, and he was sort of a developer, and as he was building and developing these neighborhoods, he said, we're going to put this big community center here will be part of the funding. I don't know how he did it. Took a slice off every piece of land that he sold and ended up with $10 million, and then builds this thing. So that where we go occasionally on Sunday, or where we would call home, or we would, they have a basketball court. They have it's like a $12 million sort of setup there. They have a BMX thing. They have $1 million playground for kids. They have a cafe. They have a swimming pool. It's actually a community center that happens to have a room that has an auditorium in it, and
Wow.
and it's run by mainly church staff and community. And so even the other day, there's a sad story. A lady who has been diagnosed, a lady that I know outside of the church community, mother of two, diagnosed with 2 types of cancer in the last couple of weeks. Is like, what am I going to do? And so I said to the pastors, do we have any food parcels? What can we do? And so I visited her with some food, and
Wow.
and she's like, I know that center because my son plays BMX there. I said, well, there's a church there as well, and this is on behalf of the church. God bless.
Wow.
So as you said, there's that gymnasium. It's a different expression. It's a community center. So many more people walk through the doors to the cafe or the playground than church on a Sunday, but they count it all as impact, I guess, or blessing to the community.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I think, so let me just ask you, because I think you're a very smart friend. I think you're highly intelligent, well read. Um, what do you, how would you say you see the impact on our move to this away from a collective culture on, oh, wow, David, this is a huge question because this leans into your manifesto stuff too with aging.
Mm.
So maybe we just go there right now. So if you just noticing your manifesto that you're working on and telling everybody a little bit about this project that will be coming out, I don't know, within the next year, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have at least an advanced copy. I'd like this book to be more of a conversation. So I have sent drafts out or offered drafts out for people to read. And then I'm going to kind of do a pre-release thing and see what comes back and see if the book can grow, because I want the book to be a collective experience as well, if you know what I mean. So because I'm publishing independently, I can have 2 versions or 3 versions of this book if I want, or branch out into something else based on the feedback that I've got, so that it is a collective project. It is based, and maybe this is part of the influence of becoming a researcher. You go out, you have an idea, you see what everyone else says, but then you go out and you test it. Is this actually the way it is?
Well,
you know
and it's also like art mimicking life or life mimicking art. You're writing a book about
yeah.
what's the ramifications of losing collective culture.
Mm-hmm.
And yet let's collectively uphold this project together. So that's really
Yeah.
sweet. Very sweet.
Thank you. I think so. For people that maybe new, the book that I'm writing, the working title is Decenter Everything, and it's the Soul Maker's Guide to Eldering at Any Age. Is kind of my subline. So I'm really focused on this concept of us having, in the West in particular, and it is true in other nations as well, having lost this practice of eldering. We have become profound and very competent, knowledgeable parents, I think, overall. Like the amount of research and what we know as parents, and the work that you do in psychology and other things. If you can have a child diagnosed with ADHD or something earlier on, can make a profound difference. Profound difference. Tara, as a side note, my daughter was diagnosed with ADHD sort of when she was 17, and even this a couple of years ago now, and even just a couple of days ago, having coffee with Natalie, we talked about it, and I said, there's still a grief in me if I look back to the ways that I parented her and I expected things of her,
Mm-hmm.
like clean your room. And she's like, I want to, but I can't. And you think they're being naughty. But really, there's a there's a neurodiverse part of her that makes that task impossible to do right now.
Yeah.
And then to reprimand her or punish her for that. Uh, yeah, I've still got stuff to process with that.
Well, I hear you because both my children are diagnosed with ADD. And so I think about that with Cademan, and he's 7 now, but emotionally he would be younger. And sometimes it just he doesn't it doesn't land because he is 7 emotionally, he's younger, and he's got this really neurodivergent brain. And so I had that moment, that grief moment the other day where I was like, right, like I gotta slow it down for so many different reasons, but it's just so hard with parenting.
So hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you parent out of maybe your own neurotypicalness or what you'd like to happen. And the battle that you're having, the frustration that you're having with them,
Yeah.
they're having a greater frustration with themselves because they'd like to do what you say as well.
Yeah.
That's how it's pitched to me, you know.
And I think it goes back to some of this problem with the individualistic culture impacts this as well. That,
Mm-hmm.
we parent on our own. We parent like we should have all the right answers. I can
Yeah.
see all the roots of what's in the back of my brain, even though I know better because I've researched attachment-based parenting for over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
I still get into my default and my
Mm-hmm.
mentality that I need to do this
Yeah,
rather than leaning into our resources. In a collective culture, we have resources.
that's right.
Yeah.
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 I don't know how we got there, but
I don't know either.
maybe
I was
that's
like,
time for another one. That'd be a good session on walking through that, you know. Um, so yeah, so back to the book. We just have this in culture today because of war, because of the way we treat our aging, because of the dissemination in an individualistic culture that families sort of mature and break off and really like, you know, leave, um, because of a whole lot of factors. Plus, Tara, we are living around 30 years longer in
mhm.
2025 than in the year 1900. So if you would have been lucky to see 54, I would have been lucky to see 51 in the year 1900. If I was a person of color, I would have been lucky to see 40
Wow.
in the year 1900, average age. So past childbearing stage, we now have this huge block of time past parenting stage. Whether you're a parent or not, I'm just making that block of time when you're in your when you can reproduce and be creative, whatever that looks like for you. We have this big block of time, and what do we do with it? And so the book is a provocation, but also sort of a wake up and a challenge to say, I mean, I can, you know, you and I are similar age, so even though your kids are a bit younger, but you we're going to move into our 50s and 60s, and the kids move away. We have a bit more freedom, probably a bit more money as well, because the costs go down. And what do we do? What do we want? Where do we go? Where do we go as a from our heart? Where do we go from our soul? I've been a parent. What's next?
Yeah.
And so I am seeing a lot of people in our generation have been really intentional, very sacrificial, very focused on being really good parents, or at least competent or good enough parents, however you label it, and have got good relationships with their kids. I see that today. I don't know about you, but I see some like really good relationships. Sure, there's dysfunction and other things, but I see some really positive things in communities.
I agree. I think we have some insight and information And then again, the more a person is in community, that helps with the parenting. And so
Yeah.
when we're in community with others and we can see the parenting, that
Hmm.
impacts the likelihood that that parent will be doing a better job because they have a cohort of parents beside
Other
them.
parents to mirror. Exactly. So that's how we got to the ADHD thing from there. So we're just far more knowledgeable. We know what we're up against, whereas our parents didn't know, that these things weren't there.
I
The
think we got
diagnosis
to
weren't there
the,
to support. Yeah,
oh,
we got to
sorry.
that part. Yeah.
I think we got to that place because we're actually eldering, is what I would theorize, is
Yeah.
that there's this sense of eldering at any age is part of what I get from I read the first part of your manifesto and I was like, I feel blown away by my friends who are raised in traditional collective cultures, my Southeast Asian friends,
Yes.
and how women of my age or a few years younger have come alongside of me and like had my back in a way that feels so spiritually corrective and different.
Mm,
That mentored me in a way through a scenario. Or I was talking to my friend today who's a Sufi, and we were just talking about this really grief ridden thing that she's facing, and and we were speaking about how did we become friends, and how did
mm,
we join into this like sisterhood
mm,
of loving each other and gaining spiritual wisdom, a
mm.
deconstructed Christian and a Sufi. And it's just this
Yes.
beautiful,
Lovely.
um, volleying of taking care, providing wisdom. I guess it's providing wisdom.
Yeah.
There's a
Yes.
wisdom piece with eldering.
There is a wisdom piece, absolutely, and I think what we have is a saturation of knowledge today. Um, we have older persons that have a lot of knowledge, that know a lot of stuff. Wisdom is more um, contextual. I think wisdom. See, knowledge will be like is that old adage of if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. You know, uh, wisdom would be able to sit, listen, be present, companion, and when it's the right time,
Mm.
uh, show, demonstrate, or tell somebody something that is timely for that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But in the West, we've kind of got like we read 10 books on wisdom, a bit of Jordan Peterson, a bit of that, some Thich Nhat Hanh, some others, and you're like, my wisdom game is increased now, and we treat it like knowledge, but it's not. You become a wisdom holder and not a knowledge dispenser.
Mm-hmm.
In those eldering stages. So when I say eldering, there's a couple things come to people's mind. They're like church elders, and I make it quickly apparent in the book I'm not talking about that, and I'm not also talking about aged persons, as we've talked about before. And you know
Yeah.
this. When I'm not at uni, I work in aged care chaplaincy, so there's no shortage of old people around, and old people that know things. They're happy to tell you things that they know. Occasionally, you will find wise older people, eldering older people. So one lady wrote to me who lives in Kenya, and her 27-year-old son is a junior elder in their tribe and community at 27. And so he is being onboarded slowly over the next few decades, even before he starts his own family, of what it means to be a true elder in this tribe and community.
Wow.
And it is collective. People who don't know the difference between individual and collective, how would you explain that, Tara? Because we're throwing these words out there with
Yeah.
no.
I'm glad you said that because I was thinking that a few moments ago, and then I'm just so spellbound by talking about this. It's so fascinating. But I would say, I mean, we could look up the actual definitions, but a collective culture is a more traditional culture. A family might live in the same home or the same compound. I was talking to, like, in prairie Canada, a collective nature would be grandparents living on the same yard as the family. That
Mm,
after school, I'd go over to grandma's and she'd be 20 steps away. That's very collective. Collective
Mm.
culture is the family, the large family getting together. So my family, we used to have a family reunion every few years, and there'd be like 150
Geez.
people there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty collective.
Yeah.
But here I am now.
Mm.
My family lives over 7 hours away, and Jason's family lives over 12 hours away.
Wow.
And we live in a suburb of Edmonton and a hamlet called Sherwood Park. My parents are here 1 week out of the month, if we're
Mm.
lucky. And
Mm.
now his dad has moved here, but he's in a care home. When we're all together, my parents live 3 blocks away, and my father-in-law lives 2 blocks away. So if the time that we're all together, it is quite collective.
Mm.
But there's times like if Jason is working out of town and my parents are gone, I am caregiving by myself. And sure, I have friends and things like that, but it's different than that real collective, like
Mm.
stability. That's how I would say, drawing on myself. These are some examples that I could think of.
Yeah, they're good examples, and I think that's a good example of a collective culture like that is geographically or location based a lot closer. But it's also, and please disagree if you don't agree, but it's also just a real mindset on how I walk through life and who I'm
Oh yeah.
considering. So when I used to teach cultural competency in this organization I worked at, we had people from Indonesia, India, um, we had people from Sri Lanka, and then Australians, Europeans were part of the Australian cohort. So we had like a great mix here, and I would sort of teach them things on like there's some great work by Erin Meyer, who wrote a book called The Culture Map and has this great tool on her website just to understand how cultures do different things. And we would talk about the collective culture. And one example I gave was like, imagine you're at the swimming pool with your family and you're in the water and you're with your family and maybe a couple friends as well or extended family. And all of a sudden you hear the lifeguard blow the whistle. What is the first thing that you do? What would you do? If you heard the whistle from the lifeguard, what would you do, Tara?
Grab my people.
Yeah. And what else?
And get out, I think.
Okay. What's the first thing your eyes would do once you hear that whistle?
I mean, I think I would look towards the whistle.
Yeah. Look towards
And
the
then,
lifeguard.
yeah,
Yeah. And that, what you do in that moment, and in a lot of people from individualistic cultures will look up and go, am I in trouble? What's wrong?
yeah,
But a
yeah,
collective culture person will look in the eyes of everyone else in their family and see if somebody looks embarrassed or ashamed or might be in trouble.
yeah,
So that it's such an instant and built-in response. It might even be, you know, I'm thinking of going to university to study this. Does this work for the family?
yes,
Instead of like, what do I want to do when I grow up?
yeah.
Now, I years ago I went to China a number of times, did some sort of, you know, basic research and interviews, and was commissioned to write a book on parenting, fathering for Chinese people. If you can find it on Amazon, but unless you read Mandarin, you'll never read it.
You
And
have lived so many lives,
I
brother.
know it's crazy. Yeah, yep, I know. Tell me about it. So, and what they have there, and you would understand too, maybe you come across this in collective cultures, particularly Asian ones, is this idea of filial piety, which is a word I had to look up. Do you know the word filial piety?
I don't think I
Yeah.
do.
So it's a Confucian based, if I'm right here, I might be wrong, but from what I understand, it's a Confucian based thing. But filial piety basically says that you have a lifelong obligation to care for your parents and to honor
Mm.
them and to do kind of what they say. If you look at the actual, it's one single character in kanji or in the Chinese language in the character. It's one word. I think it's shu or something. I can't remember how to pronounce it. And it's basically, if you can't see me on video here, but if you can imagine the character of a parent, the little kanji of a parent over one of a child. And
Oh.
when I was doing the book tour and talked about him, I said, this can look like two things: that the parent is an umbrella and supportive of the child, or the child is carrying the parent for the rest of their life. Because so many people in those cultures also feel trapped that I have been born with a job, particularly in the single parent homes, that I now have to carry and be responsible for my parent. Sure, I've moved to the US, Canada, Australia, or something, become a doctor, I'm sending money back. But one day I'm either going to have to bring my parents here, or I'm going to have to go back and care for them. Now, we do have, and I don't know what it's like in Canada, I understand it's the same. I saw an article too. We are having to, the reality of us having to move into multi-generational homes.
Mm-hmm.
Your kids will be around for longer. You might have to have an extended home because there's a housing and cost crisis. I don't think it's going away. The boomers and the silent
No.
generation lived a life and a lifestyle that we probably won't see again. It's just not sustainable. Ecologically, it's not sustainable. Economically,
Yeah.
it's not sustainable. We just live in a different age. So I'm asking questions too, like if I am, like if my son does get married and could he and his wife live with us? And then if they have children, could we all live together? Now
Mm-hmm.
there's a logistic question with that. And our Nepalese and Indonesian and Indian friends, they're like, yeah, what's the problem? But for us Westerners, we're like, it's not supposed to be like this. We're supposed to all have our own little castle. But I'm also asking, and the book is in the manifesto as a challenge, is am I the sort of person that my kids will want to live with forever?
Yes.
And so I call it decenter everything because I'm proposing that the way we must grow up and evolve and move into eldering is to decenter everything in our lives, which means we stop being egocentric, individualistic, sociocentric. Anything that sits in the center of our life, I'm about to do my PhD. I'll finish my PhD in a few years. I could end up with a career in academia. I'll turn 50 around the time that I finish. If I work for a decade, will I be willing to, perhaps at one of the best times in my career, say I'm pulling back and I'm going to stay home and care for my grandchildren and invest in them? Or will I be like, screw this, like I got a career to do. I can make a difference,
You'll say screw this if the grandchildren are around, but if they're not, you might say the other word.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're all really big questions, and in a collective culture, they're not really big, as much questions. But people I know that are from collective cultures where there's more consumerism and money and things are a lot cheaper than they used to be, and they've got access to a lot more. A lot of people in those cultures are saying that we're losing this extended family magic that we used to have.
Yeah.
We're losing that as well. So it's a really interesting time. And it's just, the book is largely a personal sort of challenge to.
And this is where we need oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm
No,
so
I don't know what I
excited.
was going to say yet. Go, jump in, please. Rescue
Well,
me.
I just think like this is where we need attachment theory education. This is where we need to know love science and
Yes.
discover love energy between people, because like you said, we need to be the type of parents who can be self-regulated so that we can co-regulate it with our adult children in a
Absolutely.
developmentally appropriate way, and then with their new little ones in a developmentally appropriate way. So the self-work and a mindful view of I want to be an elder, and what is the tradition of being an elder, the spiritual discipline. I think of the Indigenous people of Canada, the First Nations people, and the eldering is a sacred leadership. And it is not just somebody who has years. There's this sense of respect, and I'll treat you with respect. I'll bring you tobacco because I need something sacred from you, and I trust that you have a sacred thing to give me.
Yeah.
And that's a different view when we just think of the old view of getting old and live in my retirement. That is not eldering.
Correct. No, you are elderly, but you're not eldering. Yeah.
I
It's like
love a
you
play
can
on
be a
words.
parent, you can have given birth to a child, or if, you can have a child and you can be a parent on paper, but are you actually parenting? And is that effective? And is that an active
Yeah.
role and position you're taking?
I
Yeah.
think too, what we're nudging at, and you can play with this, is eldering can't happen in an individual culture, or if it happens, it doesn't happen in the way, like it can happen so much better.
I think it's an easier thing to do in a collective culture. But in the book too, I'm having to just be realistic and go, the chance of us getting back to a collective culture of what was or what we see in our, Asian neighbors that's not going to happen. Like
No.
this is baked into our consumerist, capitalist, hedonistic. These are all big words, but it's just not going to happen. So, what is it for us now in 2025? What is it where the world had 2.5 billion people in it in 1950, and in 2050, 100 years later, we've got 4 times the population. What's going to look like in 25 years when there's 10 billion people on the planet, and we have the tech that we have, and we have the
Mhm.
lifestyles that we have, and we have
Yeah.
the environmental challenges that we have? What does it look like for us? So, I have some suggestions for
Yeah.
Christians and people of faith. I say that I think one of the things that we're invited to do in eldering is decentering God, or the image of God, and in that I talk about the Trinity,
Yeah.
and that the Trinity actually has nothing in the middle. The Trinity is a decentered entity. God has no center. I think we've talked about this before.
We have, and it still blows my mind, and I still, I get parts of it, and then there's other parts where I say, but I think we're in there still somewhere. But
Yeah, we are.
I,
We're in Christ on the edge of the circle, but not in the middle. The
mm,
egocentric, anthropocentric, right, which
mm-hmm,
means the people's in human beings, the egocentric, anthropocentric image we might have, and it might be innocent. In the book I say I've been to churches and the pastor gets 3 people up from the audience, explains this is God. He's a circle dance, Father, Son, and Spirit. They're dancing around, and where are you? And he grabs somebody else and he puts them in the middle. You're in the middle of God. You're not. That would not work, because how can the Trinity see one another with a loving gaze through you? To see one another and all things, and bless all things, and be aware of all things with a loving gaze, you can't have anything in the center. That's my argument. And I give a little example. I said, Tara, if you and your husband were, desperate to go out to this great restaurant, you'd heard about it, you've booked months ahead, you turn up, he's waiting there with you, you're both dressed well, someone's looking after the kids. Like, oh, I've heard so much things. You go to the restaurant, you're brought to a table, and there's a giant, beautiful bouquet of flowers in the middle of the table. And you're like, wow, this place is great. The music's beautiful. Everything's good. And you sit down, and there's this big bouquet between you, and you go to move the vase, and it doesn't move. It's attached. Your husband laughs, and he's like, seriously, this thing's attached to the table. You look around and you see that there's other people with vases stuck in the middle of their table as well. Some of them are trying to look around it. It's just not working. Some of them they're eating in silence or on their phones. But here you are, and you look at the waiter, and he comes over. He's like, is there a problem? And they're like, yeah, we can't move this vase. It's centered in the table. He's like, yeah, if you want to move to a table where the vase can be moved to the side, I can bring you one. And you're like, yeah, I decide that. I think anytime we have anything in our lives that we deem more important than a loving gaze or connection with others, we've centered something. Our story, ourself, us as the hero, all those things.
I love
I
it.
think
I
a
get
call
it.
to
I get
eldering is decentering.
it. I
Yep.
get it. And
We've decentered that thing.
what's interesting, David, to affirm what you're saying, because I didn't get it the last time you mentioned it to me. I wasn't offended by it. I was curious. It was mysterious to me. And so I was just sitting with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the circle of security is the same thing. The
Yeah.
relationship, the parents' relationship holding the circle. The child is on the circle, they're not in it. And then with
Right.
emotionally focused therapy, we talk about the patterns of these relationship patterns, the infinity loops. And
Ah.
again, the dynamic of communication is on the line, it's not in the center. So
Yeah.
I sort of lean in, and I don't know, to some of the language that sometimes I've been using the word vibration more. You know, we have some very toxic political culture right now, and it
Hmm.
feels in Canada, I can feel the vibration on me,
Mm.
on everybody I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Or energy, you know, the space where occurrence happens. Maybe in my book, it's something that I would have used the metaphor of water for, because
Mm.
it's a no thing.
There's a no thing in the middle.
There's a
Exactly.
no thing in the middle, and those no things are just like so rich. That's the mystery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, brother, preach, right? Preach.
Hey, just pause your video for a sec. I've just got to check on something here. Pause the
Okay.
recording.
Okay, we just had a brief interruption, but I want to lean back into this idea of the need for the collective culture and the space for eldering to occur in spiritual communities.
Mm.
So we're sort of noticing the danger right now is that people are realizing their institutional trauma and their spiritual abuse that they've endured in their previous
Yeah.
church experiences. And then people are like really moving out, isolating away from such communities. However, there's this balance, right? You know, what I was noticing or mentioning before, this nurture and this nature, that there's a nature to being a part of the biology, the spiritual
Mm.
structure, the biology of the church is what I'd call it. Sometimes we say the body of Christ. So we need to sort of, I don't know, it's a strange parallel to what we're talking about, the risks when we isolate
Mm.
from going to church, but then the church people have really hurt us.
Yeah. Yeah. To use some of the decenter language too, I think some of the things that hinder us from being able to, because one if you can, I love what you just shared there, the whole thing about the eternal loop and the circle, what do you call it, the
Circle of security.
circle of security. There's so much in life that works in a circle way. If you go back to the Trinity or this idea of kenosis, once you can put yourself and put everything to the edge and understand this profoundly important thing, that it doesn't have to be in the middle to be valued and important.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be the main thing to be valued, important. Then that's, you can move things to the edge. So I think if we're talking about community or entering back into the fold, because a lot of people that move through deconstruction, um, whatever that looks like, uh, I think it's an important, and most people, Brad Jerzak and others say, this is just
Oh
part of
yeah.
the journey, this falling, this, it doesn't work anymore. This doesn't work for me. This realization is a real important part of what used to just be called renovation, renovare, or sanctification.
Mm.
That there is actually more steps. Like, it gets better, and it should be better. I think one of the traps is, again, in our individualistic culture, is we begin to center the wounds. We
Mm.
begin to center this story.
Mm.
We've gone on this, a hero's journey where we are the hero that have gone out there, but now we've been wounded. And, you know, in a collective culture, heroes' journeys are never about one person. Do you know that? They're always about tribes and groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tell these mythology stories about the great hero and the great person, and we have sports heroes more than we have sports like heroic teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have favorite teams and for teams we might be a fan of in sports, but there's always this sense it's about me. And so we do know I think some of the whole deconstructive thing, it's been very empowered by social media, is there is this soft and subconscious attempt to have this collective group of wounded people all come together
Mm-hmm.
to form another collective. And at the center of that is our story of our wounding and how we were perpetrated. And you and I, we've worked enough. I've cried with enough people. I
Yeah.
get it. I've been there. I've written volumes on it. It it hurts. It sucks. It's so bad. But can we decenter ourselves and our wounds from that story and settle into the edge of the circle
Mm.
and get a broader view? Because there's this other dynamic, I think, too, is that if you take the Trinity and you plonk yourself in the middle, instead of holding hands, in Christ with both in this kenotic or
Yeah.
kenosis emptying way, if you're in the middle, there's no source of supply. Yeah. But if you're on the edge, you're in this endless source of supply and relationship holding on. Uh, People can't see me, my hands now. I'm just clinging as if I'm holding hands here, which is this idea of the perichoresis, the circle dance. The Father's holding the Son's hand, the Son and the Spirit and the Father. There's this constant flow of energy, which we see in nature too. We see it at a quantum level with quarks and so on. We see this thing happen. If we can deconstruct and in part of that move back to the edge, we can get a new perspective and a view of what is possible. And what is possible after deconstruction into reconstruction may or may not look the same as it used to. You may or may not return to the same family, the same faith expression.
Mm-hmm.
I've found going back, and it's taken me a year, it's taken me actually years, is to go back and like this Sunday, I went back. My son plays, so it's a joy for me to see my son on the drums. I could take or leave some of the sermons and some of the music, to be honest. Partly because in my work as chaplaincy, I spend a lot of time in that space anyway.
Yeah.
So that's my story, contextual to me. But being part of a community that I can collect a food hamper and bring it to a lady that's just been diagnosed, single mum with very little family support, who's an immigrant, I can bring her a food hamper and take my son along with me and walk into a home and see her kids and see her in tears. I can't do that on my own as well as I could
Oh.
within community. So I could still text the pastor and say, can we help? They're like, yeah, we can. We've got food hamper. We can bring her frozen meals. She's around the corner. She's part of our community. Let's do it.
Yeah.
That's the power of this collective thing. And if I can get over and decenter my preference of worship or my preference of a sermon and practice decentric eldering, which is the word that I use in the book, decenter myself, my preferences, and my importance, I think that collectively I can make a bigger difference and be more effective in my eldering in community in all its expressions.
Yeah. I
But
love
that's my
that.
context. That's my context.
I think that's brilliant. And I think too, excuse me, my experience right now of the collective culture is, I mean, I'm just, thank God every day for John McMurray, who leads the Open Table Conference, and all of the culture and the people that I've been exposed to. So like yesterday, I'm in my community, but it was all online.
Yes.
And so I'm listening to Dostoevsky on Audible, and my son is then hearing this book. And I'm going to be on Brian Zann's book club this evening, listen to
Right.
Brian Zann. My kids will be there.
Yes.
And yesterday I'm on a Zoom call with David Goa and his cohort, and my son is listening. So it's this interesting, the younger generation, my eldering, is they're seeing me with my strange group of radical friends talking about nerdy things, theology things, philosophy things. And yeah, it's not as good as it could be if it was in person, but it's still on the circle. And if we're not on the circle, if we're not on the infinity loop, I mean, I think from an attachment perspective, if somebody is totally holding you, If you're in the
Mhm.
center, that's unhealthy. Just
Yes.
like if somebody's not holding you at all. So I like where you're going with this, David. I think it really does make sense. And I believe that God is the true image that informs attachment science, love science.
Mm. Mm.
So to me, it totally makes sense, because if it makes sense from a communication, emotion regulation, attachment, love energy standpoint, then I always have to wonder, like, what is this saying about God?
Yeah. As you say that too, I wonder if, you can only be securely attached if you're holding hands in the circle, not by
Mm.
yourself in the middle. And I think some people, if that is what's sold to them, they might even feel trapped in the middle.
Oh, totally trapped in the middle or trapped on the outside. And I think when I was succumbing to what I thought was the truth of my flawed nature rather than trusting my pure of heartness, I really felt outside. And
Mm.
then when I step back on the pattern, the cycle, when I start holding hands again with the group, I realized that I wasn't just outside. I was like really, really outside,
Mm.
because I'm not flawed.
Yeah.
We can't just hold on to our flawed nature. It's a part of us. It comes along for the ride. But
Yes.
we're beautiful, valuable, vibrant people. And this is what I was thinking about before. When we touch the pain of our past flawed relationships, when relational trauma has happened, sometimes we'll put that I was abused, it gets stuck in the center, and sometimes I was an abuser, gets stuck in the center. And
Mm.
oftentimes when it's church stuff, I think we have both. Like we felt abused and we felt like an abuser. And so it's very
Mm.
confusing. And that is institutional trauma.
Yeah, it is.
I
Yeah,
was serving the Kool-Aid and I was drinking the Kool-Aid.
that's right. Yeah. And as you know, moral injury, moral
Mhm.
trauma can be very real. There's things I look back on. Like when we opened up with the parenting things, man, if I had known better, I would have done that differently, you know. And the
Yeah,
Apostle Paul is a classic experience of that. Encounters Christ and is like, okay, I was just persecuting Christians, and now, oops, if I had my time again, that's life.
that's
That's
life. And the truth from the love science perspective is the good news of love science, which I also think the gospel affirms, is it's never too late.
never too late.
So and the good news with attachment focused parenting is rupture and repair. So we
Mm,
know it's never too late to repair. We can
that's
always
right.
backfill at any point. It's like I have this epiphany about a moment with my child, like Eliana, when she was little, she fell down the stairs. It was terrible. And we can always go back and visit that story.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
how did that happen, mommy? Or, I'm so thankful that you didn't get hurt worse, or whatever it is. And so I have that experience with my 8-year-old about a story when she was, I don't know, 3 or 4. And that helps my body and my brain, my neurology knows when I screw it up
Yes.
next tomorrow and the next day and the next day, I can
Yes.
come back to those stories whenever possible.
Mm, love it.
Yeah. And that's the same with what we're talking about with the attachment story of
Mm,
church history and our personal history with those groups that we've been a part of.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay, this is
Lovely.
beautiful. Anything else you want to note before we wind things down?
No, but I reckon you should tell people about what's coming up in May for you.
Okay. Thank you. So we do have the Theology Summit coming up in May. And if you are interested, you should probably register, because it's getting very full. I think we're at about 75% full, unless we open up more seating, because we're exceeding our expectations. So Theology
I'm happy
Summit,
for you.
thank you so much. William Paul Young, Brad Jerzak, Baxter Kruger, Eden Jerzak. I'll be there, Tara Boothby. And then
All
we have,
star cast.
yeah, and we have an art installation from Jared Robinson. And
Wow.
that's going to be really cool to have some it's just going to be a different vibe to have some like art that's been created for the event.
And where it's being held looks so beautiful.
It is, it's a gorgeous little area. Canmore is a resort community, and the mountains in Canada are pretty special because they're spread out enough that you can see them. It's a very
Wow.
spiritual, rich environment. Um,
Mm. So where
Very
can people
exciting.
go? You'll put that link in the.
I'll put the link, I'll put David's info below, and then I'll put the Theology Summit link below as well. And I hope that you will join us for David and Gary's new school, and come and just be blessed by conversation, and
Yeah, and be part of it.
yeah, be collective.
Yes. Collective wisdom, the wisdom of everybody there. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Lovely to be with you again, Tara.